welcome back to this Wednesday edition of Focal Point on AFR Talk. Things getting serious in the global warming debate. Fresh Mex food chain, Chipotle, that's the name of the food chain, Chipotle. They're saying, look, if we don't do something soon about catastrophic global warming, there's going to be no more avocado in our restaurants, no more avocado. So, I mean, it's one thing to talk about the polar bears and all of that and them floating away on ice floes, but now they're threatening us with a guacamole shortage. Got to do something about catastrophic global warming. Now, I want to welcome to our decision maker line someone who's been a guest on this program not too long ago, Richard Ford. He is the founder and president of the Heritage Alliance. Richard, welcome back to Focal Point with Brian Fisher.
Good to be back with you, Brian. Thank you very much.
Well, Richard, the last time we talked was a couple of weeks out from the Texas primary, which is the first major election on the 2014 calendar, and we were drawing the attention of people to the voter guide that AFA Action, you go to afaaction.net, afaaction.net, you can find the voter guide there, and we're suggesting, Richard, this is the most well-researched, the most accurate voter guide that you're going to be able to find anywhere, and we did a lot of extensive research into the candidates that were on the ballot in the Texas primary yesterday. And here's where I want to get your take on this, Richard. I've seen a lot of headlines this morning. This was a Tea Party disaster. The Tea Party went down to defeat. Tea Party challengers failed miserably, making it seem like this was a complete loss for the conservative movement. But I think, Richard, based on what I'm hearing from you and the results we're seeing, maybe the truth on the ground is a little bit different. Break it down for us.
Well, that's amazing that they can be that confused. Basically, in the races, there were 73 races there. There were 14 contested statewide races, like governor, lieutenant governor, and things like that. Of those 14, 12 of them were won by candidates who had been evaluated as conservative or very conservative. That was every one of them except 2 races. They were the highest rated that we could have given them. So that's one thing. Another thing is that 44 incumbents were challenged. 7 were defeated, and 5 were in runoffs. Now, just an idea on that, there were 2 senators. There was the most moderate state senator in the Republican side, and the second most. The one that was most moderate actually was defeated by about 500 votes. The second most moderate is in a runoff. And so, I mean, there were, frankly, in my opinion, this is the most successful campaign or a primary that I have seen where candidates who have strong conservative pro-family values have either advanced or are in a runoff. Strongest I've seen since 1975 when I first got involved.
Well, in fact, I'm looking at a release issued by Ted Cruz's office by Max Pappas, but he makes the statement in the second paragraph, not a single Tea Party favored incumbent being challenged by the Republican establishment lost in Tuesday's election. Now, there were some candidates that did not have Tea Party endorsement. In fact, some of them were actually denounced by Tea Party groups and kind of went down in flames, and the media still wants to classify them as Tea Party candidates when they did not have Tea Party backing. But here Ted Cruz is saying there wasn't a single Tea Party favored incumbent, not a single incumbent who was backed by the Tea Party and who was challenged by the GOP establishment, the heavy wallets and the big money, the GOP elites. Not one of them lost in Tuesday's election. So meanwhile, 1 liberal Republican senator and 3 incumbent House members fell to Tea Party-backed challenges. Richard, how difficult it is to unseat an incumbent, particularly when you're talking about races at the state level or at the district level, because a lot of times there's not a lot of name recognition. People just tend to vote for whoever the incumbent is. So when you've got results like this, it's actually pretty stunning.
Oh, I really am. I am extremely pleased and thankful. I feel like that we really made some great strides there. And looking at some of those statewide races, a fellow by the name of Tim Paxton, who's a strong believer, was running for the Attorney General position against the quintessential establishment Republican guy by the name of Dan Branch. Branch outspending humongously. In fact, Paxton had spent less money than any of the 3 candidates, and yet Paxton is leading in the runoff by 10 points. So I'm particularly pleased by the whole thing.
Well, I'm looking at those three. Those are statewide offices: Attorney General, Railroad Commissioner, and Agricultural Commissioner. That doesn't mean anything to people outside of the state of Texas. The point here is that there's a runoff system in Texas, and these three offices are going to go to a runoff. And in each one of those races, you've got a candidate who is graded out very conservative on our voter guide, going up against somebody who is moderate or who is somewhat conservative. In one race, you've got a very conservative candidate going up against a somewhat conservative candidate. So it seems to me, Richard, that in a case like that where conservatives are looking for the right horse to back, and you've got a runoff, it's in the Republican Party, which is generally the more conservative of the two parties. It seems like maybe in some of these runoffs, this may be a place where the voter guide, a reliable voter guide, a trustworthy voter guide, is maybe as important as any other time during the election cycle.
This is a perfect chance for Christians to have a great opportunity to impact this. For instance, in this particular election, we have 13 million registered voters in Texas, but only 1.3 million knew enough or cared enough to vote. So that means 650,000 was a majority. Well, the voter guide, we can track it by, clicks and everything, produced at least 10% of those voters. So, when we go into the runoff election, instead of 1.3 million, it would probably be more like 900,000. So there is a huge opportunity for Christians and conservatives to have an impact.
And so when you're saying that conservative voters provided 10% of the margin, this is actually based on a statistical observation of the web traffic to the website. You can get a gauge how many people are going to the website and all that kind of thing, and obviously making a substantial difference in the outcome of this primary election.
I'm saying, yes, that people went to this particular website. So people that are using this type of, and this is only really the first time we've gotten involved in, party primaries to this extent. So that's a huge first step. But I would just encourage your listeners, if they are willing, we have a tool that AFA Action can use, and if they would like to multiply their vote, and they live in Texas, and if they're willing to volunteer like 30 minutes just to look at a list of their neighbors, and they do it on their own computer, right in their own home, they can then click off other neighbors that they know share their values, and then easily share the voter guide to them. So that could be a huge multiplication factor, and I would encourage them, if they could, maybe to email your station or your website and say it, and then we can get them hooked up to identify those like-minded neighbors.
Well, and again, Richard, and we do not endorse any candidates on this voter guide. This is simply intended to be an objective evaluation of candidates based on the values that people in our network cherish. In fact, I was talking to somebody from USA Today the other day, Richard, who was calling us about these voter guides, was asking about the IRS C4 business. And Richard, this is exactly what the IRS is trying to crack down on. Daryl Issa asked Lois Lerner this morning a lot of questions about this off-plan effort to attack C4s. I mean, it's specifically, a lot of his questions directed to Lois Lerner had to do with the attack on C4 organizations. And this is exactly the kind of voter information activity that this administration and the IRS is trying to shut down.
That's right. They want you to get all your information from them.
And so we're looking here, and what I told this reporter from USA Today, look, this voter guide is useful for everybody. In other words, if you've got somebody who says, the last thing I ever want to do in my life is vote for a pro-life candidate, I'm pro-choice, I'm pro-abortion, I want to protect the right of babies to be dismembered in the womb, then you can find a candidate to avoid on this voter guide. So this is useful information, it's objective information, it's useful and helpful to everyone. So again, I just want to read just one and have you comment. As we're kind of going back over the same turf, but this is just, this is kind of our winnable war, another winnable war moment for today. You talked about the amount of participation of people that went to our voter guide. Digging a little deeper, you say in your summary, the only exception of the statewide races where a lesser graded candidate advanced was in one particular race. I think it was agricultural commissioner or
That was
Land,
George P.
Land
Bush.
Commission.
You
Yeah,
might recognize that last
yeah,
name.
George P. Bush. Remember the Bush dynasty? The only one who defeated a higher-rated candidate. In every other case, the higher-graded candidates were nominated or made the runoff. It appears that at the state legislative level that the stronger conservatives also did very well. And then you say, since I first began in 1975, so that goes back, now what is that? That goes back almost 40 years now.
Yeah, too long.
I have never seen, this is what you say, Richard, I have never seen true conservatives have this broad and this deep a success. And again, the key is to keep this going for May 27th.
Well, let me just encourage your listeners to, especially in Texas, to let you know so that they can organize their own precinct. And then secondly, though, if they're not in Texas, they can go to that website you mentioned, afaaction.net, and actually see what the voter guide would look like when it comes to their state. And they might also email you and just say, put me on the list that I can be sure to be notified when the party primary is going to be in my state and when the voter guide is available.
Well, Richard, I want to thank you for taking time to chat with us and for all the hard work. I know it's a tremendous amount of labor that goes into this voter guide because you want to be sure the information is accurate, that these candidates have been properly vetted, that it's based on substantive information and not just what the rhetoric that a candidate may use. So I know a tremendous amount of legwork and homework goes into this, and I think yesterday just validated everything that you've been doing there with Heritage Alliance, working with AFA Action, to get voters informed. You know, I believe that an informed electorate is a powerful electorate, that's the key. Knowledge is power, information is power. The more informed an electorate is, the better choices they're going to make at the ballot box. Just got 20 seconds, Richard. Anything you want to add before I let you go?
Well, Jesus said the two greatest commandments are to love God and to love our neighbors. We as Christians do not vote and vote wisely. We're going to lose the religious liberty that we have to worship God freely and to share his love with our neighbors.
Our guest has been Richard Ford, president and founder of the Heritage Alliance, working with us on the AFAAction.net voter guide. Thank you, Richard. Great to have you on. We'll talk again after the Texas runoff, May 27. Focal Point, the AFR Talk. Back in 2.